Dr. Kim Tahoe stared through the thick glass windows of the research station as lightning tore across the night sky. The storm had grown worse over the past hour, winds howling at nearly 200 kilometers per hour. His small outpost, perched on the edge of a remote mountain range, shuddered with each powerful gust. Tahoe checked the communication system again. Nothing but static. The satellite link was down, and he was completely cut off from the outside world until the storm passed. He ran a hand through his dark hair and sighed. This was his third year at the exobiology research station, studying how Earth organisms might adapt to alien environments, but he had never felt quite so isolated as tonight. A sudden flash outside, brighter than lightning, caught his attention. At first, he thought it was a meteorite, but its trajectory was wrong. It wasn't falling straight down but seemed to be attempting a controlled descent. The object wobbled in the violent wind before disappearing behind the ridge about 2 kilometers from the station. That wasn't natural, Tahoe muttered, grabbing his emergency pack and heavy weather gear. Every scientific instinct told him to wait until morning, but something else pushed him toward the door. If that was a small aircraft, someone might need help. The wind nearly knocked him off his feet as he stepped outside. Rain pelted his face like tiny needles as he activated his location tracker and headed toward the crash site. The handheld scanner picked up an energy signature unlike anything he had ever seen. It took him nearly 40 minutes to reach the crash site, climbing over slippery rocks in the storm. What he found made him freeze in place. Half buried in mud was a craft unlike any human design, sleek, almost organic in appearance, with no visible windows or doors. A section of its hull had cracked open, revealing the softly glowing interior. Tahoe approached cautiously, scanner extended before him. The readings made no sense, elements his device couldn't identify. A sound from inside the craft made him jump. He peered through the crack and saw movement. "Hello," he called out, feeling foolish. If this was what he thought it was, there was no reason to expect whoever, or whatever, was inside would understand Korean or any human language. The movement stopped, then resumed with more urgency. Something was trying to get out. Tahoe hesitated, then set down his pack and began clearing debris from the opening. When the gap was wide enough, a figure emerged, humanoid, but immediately, obviously alien. It stood about his height but moved with a strange grace despite being clearly injured. Its skin was the most remarkable feature, iridescent and shifting in color like oil on water. Where it was cut, a silvery liquid seeped out instead of blood. The alien stumbled and nearly fell. Without thinking, Tahoe reached out to steady it. The skin felt smooth and slightly warm under his gloved hand. "Are you okay?" he asked, again aware of how useless words might be. The alien looked at him with large, almond-shaped eyes that contained no whites, just deep pools of violet. It made a series of musical sounds that Tahoe couldn't begin to interpret, then collapsed against him. He had no choice but to half-carry the alien back to the station. The storm seemed to intensify, as if nature itself was protesting this unprecedented contact. By the time they reached the research facility, both were soaked and Tahoe was exhausted. Inside, he carefully laid the alien on the examination table in his lab. Under the bright lights, he could see that while the being had a broadly humanoid form, 2 arms, 2 legs, a head, there were significant differences. Its fingers were longer, with an extra joint. The silvery fluid continued to leak from several wounds. "I don't even know if I can help you," Tahoe said, gathering medical supplies. "Your biology could be completely different." The alien's eyes fluttered open. It reached toward its neck and touched a small device partially embedded in its skin. The device glowed briefly, and to Tahoe's astonishment, it spoke. "Thank you for saving me." The voice was clearly artificial, flat, and without inflection, but the words were perfectly understandable Korean. Tahoe merely dropped the medical kit. "You speak my language." This translator analyzes speech patterns and adapts, the alien explained through the device. "It requires proximity to learn." "Who are you? What are you?" Taiho asked, his scientific mind racing with questions even as he tried to assess the alien's injuries. "My name." The alien made a musical sound that the translator didn't convert. "You may call me Ja. I am a scout for the Nari people." "A scout." Taiho carefully cleaned one of the wounds, relieved when the alien didn't show signs of pain. "Why are you here?" "To establish contact. To warn you." Ja winced as Taiho touched a particularly deep cut on her arm. "Something is coming. Something that threatens both our worlds." Taiho paused, bandage in hand. "A threat? What kind of threat?" "I must communicate with your leaders," Jia said, trying to sit up but falling back weakly. "How soon can you arrange this?" Taiho glanced at the communications console, still showing nothing but static. "That's going to be a problem. The storm has knocked out all communications. We're isolated here until it passes, which could be days." Jia's skin shifted to a paler shade. "Days? I don't have days. My ship's warning beacon was damaged in the crash. My people won't know where to find me." "Your injuries are severe," Taiho observed, "but I don't know how to treat you properly. Your biology is adaptable." Jia finished for him. "My species can heal quickly under the right conditions." She looked around the lab. "Your atmosphere is compatible," she said weakly, "but my body requires assistance to adjust." "What kind of assistance?" Taiho asked, noting how her skin seemed to be losing its luster. "It is complicated to explain with this basic translator," Jia replied. "But without it, I will not survive to deliver my warning." Outside, thunder crashed as if to emphasize her words. Taiho looked at the alien lying on his examination table and made a decision. "I'll help you however I can," he said. "Just tell me what you need." The research station grew dark as evening approached. Outside, the storm continued its assault, though with less intensity than before. Taiho checked the communication system again. Still nothing but static. He turned his attention back to his unexpected guest. Jia lay on the small cot he had set up in the lab. Her breathing had become shallow, and her iridescent skin had dulled to a worrying gray tone. The silvery fluid had stopped leaking from her wounds, but they showed no signs of healing. Taiho had done his best with earth medicine, cleaning the cuts and applying bandages, but he feared it wasn't enough. "Your temperature is dropping," he said, reading the scanner he had modified to work with her unusual biology. "Is that normal for your species?" Jia's eyes flickered open. "No," she said through the translator. "This is bad sign." Her voice sounded weaker through the device. Taiho frowned. "What can I do? I have heating blankets, but I don't know if they'll help your physiology." "My people." Jia struggled to speak. "We require proximity during rest cycle, not just for warmth, for energy exchange." "Energy exchange." Taiho moved closer, his scientific curiosity piqued despite his concern. "What kind of energy?" "Bioelectric. Chemical." She gestured weakly at her skin. "We evolved on a world with harsh radiation cycles. To survive, we developed way to repair cellular damage through contact with others." Taiho considered this, like how some earth animals huddle together for warmth, but more complex. "Yes, more than warmth." Jia's skin pulsed faintly. "Without restoration ritual, healing cannot begin. I will weaken until systems fail." "This ritual, what exactly does it involve?" Taiho asked hesitantly. "Proximity. Physical contact during rest cycle." Her voice was barely audible now. "For my people, it is biological necessity. Not intimate, just survival." Taiho ran a hand through his hair, considering the implications. His scientific training told him to maintain professional distance, but his human empathy and curiosity pulled him in another direction. "I'll set up a sleeping area for you in my quarters," he finally said. "It's warmer there, and I can monitor your condition through the night." Jia's skin brightened slightly. "Thank you," she managed to say. Tai-Ho prepared a second cot in his small bedroom, positioning it near but not touching his own bed. He helped Jia move from the lab, supporting her weight as she stumbled alongside him. Her skin felt cool to the touch now, concerning him further. "Will this work?" he asked, helping her lie down. "Is this close enough?" Jia's eyes closed briefly. "I hope so," she said. "We will see by morning." Tai-Ho dimmed the lights and settled into his own bed, his mind racing with questions about her biology. Despite his exhaustion, sleep came slowly. The last thing he remembered before drifting off was the soft glow of Jia's skin, pulsing gently in the darkness like a fading heartbeat. He woke suddenly hours later to a strange sensation. Something warm pressed against his side. His eyes snapped open to find Jia had moved from her cot and was now lying beside him in his bed. His first instinct was to pull away, but then he noticed the change in her condition. Jia's skin glowed brightly, a gentle blue-green luminescence that cast soft shadows around the room. Where there had been wounds, now he could see the tissue visibly knitting together. The process looked almost like time-lapse photography of healing, but it was happening in real time before his eyes. "Jia?" he whispered, not wanting to disturb whatever process was occurring. She didn't respond. Her breathing was deep and regular now, and her body temperature had risen to what seemed like a healthier level. The scanner on his nightstand showed her vital signs stabilizing. Tai-Ho lay still, torn between scientific fascination and a sense that he should maintain some boundary. But the data was clear. Whatever was happening was helping her recover. And if what she had said was true, this was merely a biological necessity for her species, not unlike humans' need for oxygen. He carefully adjusted his position to give her space without breaking contact completely, then eventually drifted back to sleep, lulled by the gentle humming sound that seemed to emanate from her glowing skin. Morning light filtered through the small window when Tai-Ho next opened his eyes. Jia was sitting on the edge of the bed, her skin now a vibrant pearl color with subtle patterns flowing beneath the surface. The wounds that had been serious the night before were now merely faint lines. "I must apologize," she said when she noticed he was awake. Her translator's voice sounded stronger today. "I know I startled you by changing position during the night." Tai-Ho sat up, noticing that he felt unusually well-rested despite the stressful day before. "You should have explained more clearly what your restoration ritual involved. I feared you would refuse if you understood it required such close contact," Jia admitted. "Many species find our needs uncomfortable." "It was surprising," Tai-Ho acknowledged, "but I'm more interested in understanding how it works. The healing I observed was remarkable. Your wounds have almost completely closed." Jia's skin rippled slightly in what Tai-Ho was beginning to recognize as an expression of emotion. "Our bodies evolved to share healing energies," she explained. "The proximity activates cellular regeneration processes. My skin contains specialized organelles that function like your plant's chloroplasts, but instead of converting light to energy, they convert bioelectric energy from nearby living beings." "You were using my energy?" Tai-Ho asked, concerned. "No, not consuming it," Jia clarified. "More like borrowing its pattern. The process is beneficial to both participants, though you might not notice the effects as dramatically as I do." Tai-Ho realized he did feel unusually alert and refreshed. "Is that why I feel so rested?" Jia nodded. "A side effect. Your cells have been stimulated to optimal functioning. On my world, isolation means death. We cannot heal or properly rest without the energy exchange." The storm outside had finally calmed. Tai-Ho went to check the communication system and found it still offline, though the satellite dish appeared intact. "It may be another day before we can contact anyone," he told Jia as they shared the simple breakfast he had prepared. "Will you need the ritual again tonight?" "Yes," she said simply, "until my body fully adapts to Earth's environment. I understand if this causes discomfort. I'm a scientist, Tai-Ho replied with a small smile. Discomfort is part of discovery. He paused, then added, but perhaps next time, just ask first. 3 days after the crash, Jia had recovered enough to move around the station freely. Her skin now shimmered with health, the colors shifting between pearl and soft blue as she examined Tai-Ho's research equipment with obvious interest. Your understanding of extraterrestrial biology is impressive, even without contact, she said, studying his notes on theoretical alien life forms. Tai-Ho smiled at the irony. Until you arrived, it was all theoretical. Now I have a living subject, and I have been a willing specimen, Jia replied, her translator conveying what might have been humor. But there is much more I must tell you now that my strength has returned. They sat in the station's small kitchen area, steam rising from cups of tea that Jia had approached with cautious curiosity before deciding she could safely consume. You mentioned a threat when you first arrived, Tai-Ho prompted. Something coming toward both our worlds. Jia's skin darkened slightly. Yes, my true mission was not simply to make contact. She set down her cup carefully. Our scientists detected an approaching cosmic wave 3 of your Earth years ago. It moves through space, unseen by conventional methods. What kind of wave? Tai-Ho asked, his scientific mind immediately questioning. We call it the silent death, Jia said. It disrupts organic molecular bonds. Where it passes, life unravels. Tai-Ho felt a chill. Like radiation. More complete, more final. Jia's fingers traced patterns on the table's surface. It has destroyed 3 inhabited worlds that we know of. Earth lies directly in its path. Why hasn't our science detected this? Tai-Ho wondered aloud. Your technology focuses on wrong spectrums. The wave distorts space subtly. By the time your instruments detect the distortion, it will be too late. Tai-Ho pushed back from the table and crossed to the communications console. We need to warn Earth's governments immediately. How much time do we have? 6 months, perhaps less, Jia said. But simple warning is not enough. That is why I was sent ahead of the main contact party. To warn us, Tai-Ho repeated, still trying to process the scale of the threat. And to assess, Jia added quietly. Tai-Ho turned back to her. Assess what? If humans could survive. If our species are compatible enough to share the solution we've developed. Jia stood and moved toward him, her steps graceful despite her alien form. The restoration ritual was not just for healing. It allows me to assess our biological compatibility. Tai-Ho stared at her, feeling suddenly used. You've been testing me. Well, I thought I was helping you. Both are true, Jia said. I needed healing, but each night as we shared energy, I was also gathering data about your cellular structure, your genetic code. Without my consent, Tai-Ho said flatly. Jia's skin rippled in patterns he now recognized as distress. I could not risk being turned away before completing my assessment. Too much depends on it. Both our worlds. Before Tai-Ho could respond, the communications console emitted a sharp beep. The system had finally reconnected to the satellite network. Messages began flooding in immediately. Dr. Kim, respond immediately. This is an urgent priority command. The text flashed on screen from the Korean Science Ministry. Tai-Ho hesitated, looking back at Jia, who stood watching him with unreadable alien eyes. What did you discover in your assessment? He asked quietly. That there is hope, she replied. Our biologies share core patterns that suggest a common evolutionary origin, despite developing on different worlds. It is what my people suspected when we first detected Earth. Tai-Ho's finger hovered over the response button. And this matters how? Because our solution requires biological compatibility. The method we've developed to survive the wave requires our species to share certain genetic markers. Jia moved closer. The restoration ritual activates these dormant connections, like what happened between us. The console beeped again, more insistently. Dr. Kim, satellite imagery confirms impact of unknown object near your position. Report status immediately. Tai-ho slowly typed a response. Station secure. Communications just restored after storm damage. Will provide full report shortly. Almost immediately, a new message appeared. Be advised. Government team led by Dr. Park, Sunwoo dispatched to your location. ETA 6 hours. Secure all research materials and prepare for evacuation. Classified astronomical anomaly detected. Possible connection to impact event near your station. Tai-ho turned to Ja. They're coming. They know something crashed, and they've detected something in space. Is it your people? Or the wave? Both, perhaps, Jia said. My ship would have sent an automated distress signal before crashing. My people will be searching. As for the anomaly, the wave creates subtle distortions as it approaches. Your scientists may have detected these early signs. Tai-ho paced the small room. I have to tell them about you. They're sending a team here. What will they do when they find me? Ja asked. I don't know, Tai-ho admitted. Quarantine, certainly. Tests. You would be the most significant scientific discovery in human history. And my warning, will they believe it coming from a captive alien? Tai-ho had no answer for that. He knew how governments worked, how slowly decisions moved through bureaucracies. If Joe was right about the time frame, humanity couldn't afford delays. Tell me exactly what this solution is, he demanded. The one that requires our biological compatibility. It is complex, Jia said. But in simple terms, the wave disrupts molecular bonds. Our scientists developed a method to strengthen these bonds through a synchronized biofield generated between compatible species. The restoration ritual is the first step in this process. And it worked for us, Tai-ho said, remembering the healing he had witnessed. Yes, better than expected. Jia's skin brightened. You responded strongly to the energy exchange. Few species we've encountered show such compatibility. The console beeped again with more messages, but Tai-ho ignored them. He found himself at a crossroads, torn between his duty as a scientist and citizen, and his growing belief in Joe's warning. 6 hours, he said finally. We have 6 hours before they arrive. Tell me everything. About your people, this wave, and exactly what your solution entails. Then I'll decide what to tell Dr. Park when she gets here. Jia's skin glowed with evident relief. Thank you for listening. Few would give even that chance. I'm not promising anything beyond listening, Tai-ho cautioned. But what I've seen of your biology is unlike anything in our science. If there's even a chance you're telling the truth about this threat. Outside the window, the sun broke through the clouds for the first time since the storm, casting long shadows across the mountain landscape. Somewhere in that bright sky, if Joe was to be believed, death was approaching. And Tai-ho might be one of the few humans who could help stop it. Helicopter blades whipped the air as 3 black vehicles descended on the small clearing beside the research station. Tai-ho stood at the window, watching government officials in protective gear pour out and form a perimeter. Beside him, Jia's skin had shifted to a muted gray, her species equivalent of camouflage. Remember, Tai-ho said quietly, let me speak first. In the 5 hours since communications had been restored, Tai-ho had made a decision. He would not hide Jia, but he would protect her. She had shared too much critical information about the approaching threat, and he believed her, not just with his mind, but with a strange new certainty he felt in his body. The station door opened with a hiss as Dr. Park, Sunwoo entered, followed by 2 men in hazmat suits. She was shorter than Tai-ho had expected, with sharp eyes that immediately fixed on Jia. Dr. Kim, she said calmly, I see the reports of an extraterrestrial presence were accurate. This is Jia, Tai-ho said, stepping slightly in front of his alien guest. She's a scout from a species called the Nari. She crashed during the storm. Dr. Park nodded, as if alien visitors were an everyday occurrence. We need to establish quarantine protocols immediately. The containment team will. That won't be necessary, Taiho interrupted. We've been in close contact for several days. If there were any biological threats, I'd be showing symptoms by now. Dr. Park's eyebrows rose. Close contact. Define that, please. Before Taiho could answer, Jia stepped forward. I required cellular proximity to heal my injuries, her translator said. Dr. Kim assisted me. I see. Dr. Park turned to the men behind her. Get the portable lab set up. I want full bioscans of both Dr. Kim and the visitor. Before you do that, Taiho said, there's something more urgent we need to discuss. The cosmic anomaly your team detected. Jia knows what it is. It's why she came to Earth. Dr. Park's professional composure cracked slightly. How could she possibly? The silent death, Jia said. A molecular destabilization wave that has destroyed 3 worlds already. My people detected it approaching your solar system. Dr. Park stared at the alien for a long moment, then pulled Taiho aside. Is this some kind of joke? We only confirmed the anomaly's existence 2 weeks ago. It's real, Taiho insisted. And it's worse than you know. Jia says it breaks down organic molecular bonds. Nothing alive survives its passing. To his surprise, Dr. Park didn't dismiss his claim. Instead, she pulled a tablet from her bag and showed him a simulation. Like this. The screen displayed a wavefront moving through a model of DNA. As it passed, the molecular structure unraveled. How did you? Taiho began. The anomaly created ripple effects we could detect, Dr. Park explained. We've been analyzing them for months. Last week, we finally understood what we were seeing. She looked up at him with grim eyes. We've been calling it the dissolution event. Every model shows the same result. Total cellular breakdown of all organic life when it reaches Earth. Taiho felt a chill despite having heard this before from Jia. Hearing it confirmed by Earth scientists made it terrifyingly real. Then you understand why Jia's presence is so important, he said. Her people have developed a potential defense. Dr. Park turned to Jia. Is this true? You have a way to stop this. Not stop, Jia clarified. Survive. Through biological adaptation. The next hours passed in a blur of tests. Dr. Park's team converted half the research station into a makeshift laboratory. They took blood samples from both Taiho and Jia, ran genetic analyses, and conducted detailed scans. Taiho sat on an examination table as Dr. Park reviewed the results, her expression growing increasingly astonished. Your DNA is changing, Park told Taiho, showing him the screen. The proximity to the alien, to Jia, has activated dormant genes in your cellular structure. Look at these sequences here and here. They weren't active in your previous medical records. Is that dangerous? Taiho asked. I don't know, Park admitted, but it's remarkable. These dormant sequences, they're not in our genetic database, yet they appear to be perfectly integrated with your human DNA, just inactive until now. Jia, who had been quietly observing from across the room, approached. May I see? She asked. Dr. Park hesitated, then turned the screen toward her. Jia studied it, her skin pulsing with patterns Taiho now recognized as excitement. As I suspected, she said, the restoration ritual activated the connecting sequences. Connecting sequences? Park asked. Both humans and Neri carry genetic markers from an ancient spacefaring civilization. Jia explained. My people discovered this decades ago, when we first detected your world. We share approximately 18% of our genetic code, far too much for random convergent evolution. Taiho looked at his hands, remembering how quickly a cut on his finger had healed that morning. Far faster than normal. The ritual awakened these dormant genes, he said slowly. That's why I'm healing faster, and why I felt so energized this morning. Healing faster. Dr. Park immediately took his hand, examining it. Show me. One of the technicians brought a sterile scalpel. Under carefully controlled conditions, they made a small cut on Taiho's arm. They all watched in amazement as the wound closed within minutes. "That's impossible," Park whispered. "No," Jia said. "Just forgotten. My people believe we were once one species. Our bodies remember what our histories forgot." Dr. Park ordered more tests. They discovered that Taiho's cells now showed remarkable resistance to radiation and oxidative stress. His mitochondria had become more efficient, and his immune system was operating at unprecedented levels. "The silent death disrupts molecular bonds," Jia explained as they reviewed the results. "The activated genes strengthen these bonds, creating resilience against the wave's effects." "And this happened because of your restoration ritual?" Park asked, still skeptical despite the evidence before her. "Yes. The energy exchange activates the dormant genetic material," Jia confirmed. "On our world, we discovered this adaptation naturally over generations. For humans, the process can be accelerated through direct contact with Nari." Dr. Park paced the small lab. "Even if this works, and I'm not saying I'm convinced yet, how could we possibly implement this on a global scale? We're talking about billions of people." "My people are coming," Jia said simply. "They will bring ships capable of accommodating millions. The process can be scaled." Taiho watched Dr. Park's face as she processed this information. He had gone through the same mental journey: disbelief, skepticism, and finally the dawning realization that this alien visitor might represent humanity's only hope. "I need to contact the Science Ministry," Park said finally. "This changes everything about our response to the dissolution event." As she left to make the call, Taiho moved beside Jia. "You never mentioned ships coming." "There was no point until I confirmed our compatibility," Jia replied. "If humans had proven resistant to the genetic activation, evacuation would have been pointless." "And now?" Jia's skin glowed with subtle blue patterns. "Now there is hope. For both our peoples." When Dr. Park returned, her earlier skepticism had been replaced with cautious determination. "The ministry is sending a larger research team," she said, "and they're contacting international authorities. If what Jia says is true, we'll need worldwide cooperation." "It is true," Taiho said with quiet certainty. "I can feel it." Park looked at him curiously. "That's not very scientific, Dr. Kim." "Neither is an alien appearing during a storm to save humanity," he replied with a small smile. "Sometimes we have to trust what seems impossible." 3 months after Jia's crash landing, the skies of Earth filled with ships. The Nari fleet arrived just as astronomers confirmed the approaching wave had reached the outer solar system. Pluto's small moons had simply disintegrated as the invisible force passed through them. Panic spread across Earth as the reality of the situation became impossible to hide. Governments worldwide had initially resisted the truth that an alien threat was approaching and that humanity's only hope lay with another alien species. But as the evidence mounted and the wave's effects were observed on the outer planets, resistance gave way to desperate cooperation. Taiho stood on the observation deck of the Nari command ship, watching smaller vessels shuttle between Earth and the fleet. Each ship carried hundreds of Nari volunteers ready to participate in the restoration ritual with human partners. "The process is moving too slowly," Dr. Park said, joining him at the window. In the months since their first meeting, she had become both colleague and friend. "At this rate, we'll only reach about 30% of the population before the wave hits." "The rate is accelerating," Taiho pointed out. "Each human who completes the ritual can help others adapt more quickly. The effect spreads." Park nodded, though her face showed worry. "The resistance isn't helping. There are still millions refusing to participate." Taiho understood their fear. Despite all evidence and demonstrations, many humans couldn't accept the idea of sharing such intimate proximity with aliens, even to save their lives. "They'll change their minds when the wave reaches Mars," he predicted grimly. Jia entered the observation deck, her skin glowing with the deep blue that Taiho now recognized as her response to his presence. Their connection had grown stronger with each passing day. What had begun as a simple healing ritual had evolved into something more profound. a biological synchronization that scientists on both sides were still struggling to fully understand. "The Council wishes to speak with you both," she said. "The wave has accelerated. New calculations show it will reach Earth in 17 days. Tai-Ho felt his stomach drop. "That's a week earlier than predicted." "Yes, the planet's gravitational fields affected its trajectory." Jia's skin pulsed with concern. "We must implement the shield plan now." The three of them hurried to the command center, where Nari leaders and human representatives were already gathered around a holographic display of the solar system. The wave appeared as a red front moving steadily toward Earth. "We've confirmed that the ritual-enhanced humans are developing the biofield response," the head Nari scientist was explaining. "But the coverage is insufficient. We estimate only 40% of Earth's population will be protected by the time the wave arrives." "Then we deploy the shield technology," Jia stated firmly. "The ships weren't designed to create a planetary shield," another Nari objected. "The power requirements would disable our fleet." Tai-Ho stepped forward. "What if we combine approaches? Use the ships to create focal points and amplify the biofields generated by those who've completed the ritual." The room fell silent as the idea was considered. "Theoretically possible," the Nari scientist admitted, "but it would require precise synchronization between ship systems and biological fields." "We can coordinate that," Dr. Park said. "Our satellite network could serve as the connection points." "It would require someone to coordinate from within the wave boundary," Jia added quietly. "Someone who has fully integrated the genetic changes." All eyes turned to Tai-Ho and Jia. "Us," Tai-Ho realized. "You're talking about us." Jia's skin rippled with confirmation. "Our connection is the strongest documented. If anyone can maintain synchronization during wave exposure, it's us." The next 2 weeks passed in a blur of preparation. Across Earth, the restoration ritual became standard practice, performed in specially designed facilities where humans and Nari partners lay side by side, sharing the energy exchange that activated humanity's dormant genetic potential. Religious leaders reframed the ritual as a sacred bond between species. Scientists explained it as evolutionary activation. Whatever people chose to call it, the results were undeniable. Those who completed it developed remarkable cellular resilience and the ability to generate subtle biofields that could resist molecular destabilization. As the wave approached Mars, Earth watched in horror as the red planet's atmosphere simply unraveled. The wave was nothing like conventional weapons or natural disasters. It didn't destroy so much as unmake, reducing complex molecules to their component parts. On the final day, Tai-Ho and Jia boarded a specialized vessel designed to position them at the focal point between Earth and the approaching wave. Around the planet, Nari ships had formed a geometric network, each vessel crewed by pairs of humans, and Nari, whose biofields had been fully activated. "Are you afraid?" Jia asked as their small ship reached position. Tai-Ho considered the question. "Yes," he admitted, "but not of dying. I'm afraid of failing." Jia's skin glowed warmly. "In my culture, fear of failing others is considered the most noble form of fear." Their vessel's view screen showed Earth below them, beautiful and blue and terrifyingly vulnerable. Between them and the waves stood only the thin line of Nari ships and the invisible network of biofields they hoped to create. "Wave contact in 5 minutes," the ship's computer announced. Tai-Ho and Jia moved to the ship's core chamber, where a specialized platform had been installed. They lay down side by side, initiating the restoration ritual one final time. But this was different from all previous occasions. Their connection had grown so strong that their biofields merged almost instantly, creating a luminous aura visible even to the naked eye. Initiating synchronization, Tai-Ho said into his communication device. Across the network, similar pairs of humans and Nari joined their fields, creating a web of energy that the ships amplified and directed outward toward the approaching threat. The wave hit with no sound, no dramatic visual, just a subtle distortion of space that rippled across their sensors. Taiho felt it like a cold wind trying to pull apart his very atoms. Beside him, Jia's body tensed as they fought together to maintain their field. "Hold," she whispered, her voice strained. "Focus on the connection." Around Earth, the network strained against the wave's pressure. Some points failed as ships lost power or biofields collapsed. For terrible moments, it seemed the defense would crumble entirely. Then something unexpected happened. The humans and Neri, who had completed the ritual but weren't part of the network, began generating their own fields, spontaneously linking to the larger structure. Millions of connected pairs created a secondary layer of protection that strengthened the primary shield. Taiho and Jia, at the focal point, channeled this unexpected surge of energy, directing it to reinforce weak points in the network. Their combined field glowed so brightly that nearby ships reported it outshining the sun. Hours passed as the wave crashed against the shield. Taiho lost track of time, aware only of Jia beside him and the constant struggle to maintain their connection against the force trying to pull them apart at the molecular level. Finally, almost a day later, sensors indicated the wave was beginning to dissipate, its energy spent against the unexpected resistance. "We're succeeding," Taiho whispered, his voice hoarse from exhaustion. "Yes," Jia agreed. "The wave is weakening." As their ship rotated, Earth came into view again. From this distance, Taiho could see something astonishing. The planet glowed with a soft luminescence, visible even from space, as billions of humans and their Nari partners maintained the ritual that was saving their world. When the last of the wave had passed, leaving Earth intact, Taiho and Jia were transferred to the Nari command ship. They were exhausted but triumphant as they made their way to the observation deck to see what they had saved. "Our ancestors faced this before," Jia told him as they watched Earth rotate peacefully below them. "That's why our genetics contained the adaptations. They separated our peoples to ensure diversity of adaptation. They knew we would need to find each other again." "So we were one species once?" Taiho asked. "Yes, and now perhaps we will be again." Jia's skin rippled with patterns that Taiho had come to recognize as joy, not through losing our uniqueness, but through embracing our connection. Below them, Earth continued to glow softly as humans and Neri celebrated their shared victory. What had begun with an alien crawling into a scientist's bed during a storm had become humanity's salvation. And now, as ships prepared to return people to the surface, it promised to become something more, the beginning of a new evolutionary chapter for both species. "What happens now?" Taiho asked, watching transport ships move between Earth and the fleet. "Now," Jia said, her translator conveying a smile in her voice, "we truly learn about each other, not just for survival, but for growth." Earth shimmered below them, changed forever, not just saved, but transformed by the connection between two species who had once been one, and might be again.